Good morning, YouTubers. Glad to see you today. And as you can see, we're not alone today. We have our good friend Tony Luizzo with us, and he's going to be sharing his story with us. So, Tony, welcome to our YouTube channel.
Well, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
We're looking forward to a good time. We hope all of you are doing well. And we're excited about this episode because we all have battles that we're facing in life.
That's right.
We all have struggles. For you, it may be a relationship problem. It may be issues at school. It may be some financial trouble. Or it may be a health issue that you or one of your family members are going through, which is the case for Tony and his son, Logan. And we'll hear more about that story. But we're just going to dive right into the podcast today in this conversation that we're going to have. And so let's gather around, everybody. It's time for a family meeting. The Family Meeting is a show that's all about family relationships. We're the Osterkamps. I'm Thomas. This is my wife, Lysandra.
Hello, and welcome to our family. Welcome to episode 131 of the Family Meeting podcast. On today's episode, we are so honored to have a very special guest on with us.
Yes.
Tony Luizzo is with us. Welcome to the Family Meeting, Tony.
Thank you, guys. I'm excited about sharing our story and everything that God has done in our life. It's pretty exciting just to be able to brag on God and have people partner with us to pray as we continue this journey.
Yes.
And it really is an honor to have Tony with us today. Tony is a friend, but he's also an inspiration. His faith and the faith of his family is inspirational to so many. And we're excited for you to hear about all the things that God is doing in them and through them. And I know that this conversation is going to be a help to you in whatever battles you're facing.
That's right. But before we dig in deep, we need to really get to know Tony a little bit and hear a little bit about his family. We are the Family Meeting, and we talk about family relationships. So let's start kind of at the beginning of your family, Tony. Tell us how long you've been married.
So Jenny and I have been married for 25 years, and May 10th of this year we'll be celebrating 26, so it's been an amazing journey.
Well, congratulations on that. That's fantastic. And I have to say, your wife is so beautiful. They're like, I've seen some family pictures on social media where I'm like, which one is the mom?
That's awesome.
Mom? She's
I'll let her know you said that. That's awesome.
Please do.
Yeah.
I know everybody else thinks the same thing.
Yes.
You're a couple like we are. They look at us as husbands and think that guy must be rich.
Oh, yeah. It's like, how in the world did he get her? I thank God that I married out of my league. That's for sure.
I'm right there with you. So,
Yeah.
Tony, can you kind of share with us, as we're having this introduction, like, what do you do for a living?
So I am the lead pastor of Fellowship Baptist Church. I have been at this church for going on 23 years, and I came here as a youth pastor as soon as I graduated from college, and so I have been the lead pastor for over 13 years. So I love my job. I love what I do. It's awesome.
That's awesome. To stick at it that long is like,
Yeah.
that breaks the odds, because most pastors are only sticking around a couple years. So
Very rare.
13 leading a church, that is incredible. And that's, we're talking about the battle that you're facing. And
Right.
so leading a church while going through a health issue with your son, I mean, that adds a whole nother layer of complexity.
Yes,
It's been challenging, but I think being part of a church family has been one of the greatest blessings. And I don't know how people do it without it, honestly. And I'm not just saying that from the perspective of being a pastor. I'm saying that from the perspective of just not being alone. And God has given us the local church for that. And to be honest, I've been on the other side of it so much, of ministering to people as they've been going through things. And this time I was the one being ministered to, and it just reminded me that this is what the church is all about. So I thank God for my church family and our network and the people around me. It has been one of the main foundational things that God has given us to carry us through this journey.
Wow.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think about 2 years ago when Lysandra went through the health issues she did and almost lost her life, to have the people who surrounded us, brought us meals, prayed for us, encouraged us, helped pay the financial bills.
Yeah.
And so if you're out there and you don't have a good church family, hey, you need to find one.
Right.
Find that
Right.
support system that'll be there in the difficult times.
Okay, so let's hear a little bit more about your family. How many kids do you have, and what are their ages?
All right, so we have 3 kids. My oldest is Jordan. He is 22. Me just saying that out loud sounds weird because just having a kid in his 20s is just so weird for me. So he's my oldest, and then my second is Logan. He's 19. And then my baby is my girl. God bless us with a daughter for our grand finale, and she is 16. So we have 3 kids.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. You know, and being a dad is awesome, and there's a lot of things to enjoy about being a dad. It's a great responsibility, but it's a lot of fun. What do you enjoy most about being a dad?
Oh, that is a great question. You know, it's changed, and you guys know of having like teenagers and stuff like that. When they were little, it was teach them the basics of life and teach them how to pray, and we go to church and, you know, coming home and having fun, and days off would be going to Chuck E. Cheese and doing stuff like that. But I'll tell you, I love where we're at in life now. I love, and I know I've got to explain this as I say this because people would take it the wrong way. I love being their friend. You know, they say that you can be their friend, but you can't be their buddy. And I understand that I am their dad. But as they grow up and you share in their interest in, my oldest son, he does construction. And I grew up doing construction before I went into ministry, and that's kind of a niche that I have. And we were able to share that together. We do projects together, and as he does his business, I'm able to speak into it and be able to do some things with him. And Logan, he helps with the tech team at the church, and he's involved in our team ministry as a leader and a mentor. And I have that in common with him, that we can talk about just life and ministry. And Morgan's on our worship team and our teen class, and she's involved in a number of ministries. And so just, I don't, sharing life with them, you know, not just you better do this and make your bed and, you know, it's time for school, but just what is God doing and how is God using you? It's just, it's awesome. And one of the fun things that we've gotten into, especially since Logan has been sick, is doing escape rooms. And we have a spreadsheet of just all the escape rooms that we've done, and we look up ones that are like popular across the country, and we try to hit those and stuff. So I love being a dad, and I love going on adventures and being part of their life. It's awesome.
That is fantastic. So we have done several escape rooms as well. And
that's
we've never,
awesome.
ever made it out.
Never.
Oh, no.
So we're
Maybe we
terrible
can
at
give you
escape
guys
rooms.
some advice or whatever, because yes,
We
it's
don't
cool
know what we're doing in there.
For us as a family. We all have different skill sets, and you know, it's fun for us to be able to see our strengths. My wife is the brain. She goes in there and is able to break down all the puzzles, and then the physical puzzles me and the boys do, and it's awesome. It's such a fun family building thing. It's incredible.
Very cool.
Yeah, we might definitely need some pointers there.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, let's get into really what's going on in your life right now and this season that you're in. We know that one of your children has been fighting a pretty intense battle right now.
Yeah.
And just start us kind of at the beginning. When did you really notice that something wasn't quite right?
Yeah, so it was crazy. A year and a half ago, Logan was graduating, and as he was getting ready to graduate, he had a cough. And, of course, no parent freaks out about a cough. It's just, you know, part of life.
Right.
And after he had it for a few weeks, we did take him in, and the doctor was like, I can't find anything pointing to why he would have this cough. So their thing was, it's just got to run its course, you know. So we were just like, okay. So in the back of our minds, we're not thinking my son has cancer. We're just thinking he's got to get through this. Well, the biggest concern that we had at the time was him graduating. Because during that time, any signs of COVID, you couldn't graduate.
Oh, right.
You know, so you couldn't walk. And we were like, no. So the night before his practice and graduation, we were like doing everything that we could, drink this tea, do all this, so he wouldn't be coughing because we were trying to suppress it and stuff. So he was able to graduate. He's wearing a mask so he could kind of, you know, like hide the cough a little bit and, not make it so obvious and things like that. And so after he graduated, we had a really packed number of weeks. And Logan even went on a road trip during that time, which is just an amazing thing. Knowing what happened next is about a few weeks after he graduated, he was working in the tech team of our church, the creative team, and Logan passed out.
Oh, wow.
And he just slumped over and leaned over on Richard, who is our creative director. And Richard kind of pushed him over. And honestly, what we thought, because Logan likes to stay up late playing video games, we thought he fell asleep. And we quickly found out that he had actually passed out. We thought, that not related to the cough or whatever. We thought maybe his blood sugar dropped and maybe he has a new issue or something like that. So we took him in to get checked in immediately. And the doctor laid him down and then had him set up, and his heart rate changed drastically from laying down to sit up. And he goes, if he's going to college, he said, let's check this out a little bit. So he scheduled an EKG, and then the EKG came back with just a couple of marks on it saying something's off. So they were still saying this is precautionary. It's probably just part of growing up, things like that. And so we scheduled at Children's Hospital for him to go in and get an echocardiogram and some minor tests just to be sure. To be honest, I am very involved in my kid's life, and I didn't go because my wife Jenny, she was just like, "There's no reason for you to miss out on all your meetings when we're just going in. They're just going to check over and tell us that everything's okay." So I'm sitting doing premarital counseling, and my phone rings. And I didn't answer it right away, so Jenny calls back, and I heard a voice on the other side that I'm not used to hearing. It was just like a panic, and she said, they just found that Logan's heart is moved 2-3 inches out of the way. And I'm like,
wow.
What? And she said it's they think that he has a mass in his chest.
Wow.
And they didn't say cancer at the time, they just said a mass. I literally stood up. I said, I've got to go. I drove to the hospital and walked in. They put him in for a CT scan, and they found a giant mass in his chest. His whole chest was a mass. It wasn't just the cancer that they found was 7 inches long, 5.2 inches wide, and 3.2 inches or 3.5 inches wide. So it was like a brick. It was like a small football in his chest. And so that day he went from the emergency room into the intensive care and it started a journey that absolutely rocked our world. And it was crazy. It was crazy, just to say the least. They didn't know what kind of cancer. Because of the stress on his heart, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't knock him out. They couldn't do surgery because he would have died from anesthesia. And so they said, we can't go in and fix anything, which it just is what it is. And so they would not let him walk across the room without having a nurse by his side because his heart condition was so extreme. We didn't even know it. We had no idea. But his heart rate was really, really high. It was constant because the heart was making up for the stress that it was under. And so from there, we got admitted into the heart or the cancer floor, and they started extreme. The highest of chemo's level measured on a level of 1 to 10. He was a 10.
Wow.
And that started us on his journey. And so that's where our journey began. And we went through crazy ups and downs from there of him going through being admitted in the hospital. For that time, it was about 2 weeks. And we didn't know if we'd ever go home because we didn't think his heart was capable of walking out the door. And so that brought us into our journey, and that's how it all started.
Yeah, and it's just crazy how quickly life can just change in a moment.
Yep.
In a second, in a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so you find out your son has cancer. So what's the original diagnosis and outlook that they gave you once they were able to run some of these tests?
So that part was scary. You can have faith and be scared to death. And I think that's important for people to understand.
Totally.
I've often wondered when Daniel walked into the lion's den, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked into the fiery furnace, they weren't like skipping in, you know.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's there's fear.
Right.
And I know perfect love casts out fear, but fear is present. And we were waiting that first week to find out what it was, because they were able to get a biopsy, but they had to do it with him awake. So they were able to numb him and do what they call a twilight, just to make him loopy, so he wouldn't remember the pain of having that. And they did a bone marrow biopsy, a double bone marrow biopsy, and they did the biopsy on his chest. And the test results came back inconclusive. Where the cancer was at, which was his heart and chest, he was coughing because it was pushing down on his lungs. And all the other problems we're having was all related to this. So we knew it was huge. They knew it was aggressive, the fact that it was so big. But everything didn't make sense to come. So we went on a journey of trying chemo that was just a shot in the dark. So all those weeks that we were on chemo, they literally said to us, we don't know if this is going to do a thing because all the test results are inconclusive. So they sent it out to research hospitals because he was at the James. He's at the OSU James. So he's at one of the top research hospitals in the nation. Everything came back inconclusive, but the closer we got to it, what was happening is what they were taking off the table. Not that there's good cancers, but any cancer that was easily curable was like, we just know that it's not good cancer, that it's going to be rare. It's going to be something that's unresearched, and it's going to be something that we have no idea what treatments are actually going to work. So everything was just walking in the darkness. It wasn't until after his surgery that we had, which we'll get into that later, and they were able to take a piece of it and send it off, and then all these other things. So they came out to just tell us that that it is extremely rare. The place and everything of it falls into less than 1% of all cancers in the world.
Wow.
And that they think it's a liposarcoma, and that's all that they know. And so so we're still somewhat in the dark, even though we're with the sarcoma category and things. So it's still, you talk about a walk of faith. It's a walk of faith for them too, because they really don't know. And they didn't know. And so they would come in and sit down and talk to us, and they just say, honestly, we're just being straight with you. We don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know if it's connected. We don't know. And so, but anyways, God did so many crazy things in the unknown. And that's where faith comes in. When man doesn't know, God does.
Most definitely.
Let's talk a little bit about your faith. I mean, watching your child go through something like this has got to be unbelievably difficult. I mean, I can't even really fully understand, and probably most people can't. Only a handful of people have really gone through what you are going through. But through all this, have you had moments that made you question your faith or what God was doing?
Yes. I am a pastor and have been in pastor role for almost 23 years. And I've been in church my entire life. And you always imagine the faith that you would have in a situation like this.
For sure.
You know, because you read the stories and you're just thinking, if God be for me, who can be against me? That's the thought. Yeah. So you don't think that you would struggle. You just think that you would put it in high gear and go. And at first I did have faith that was struggling, but I just thought, God's got a plan. God's got a plan. I'm just standing at the edge of the lion's den. I'm marching around the walls of Jericho, and I've just got to wait for the walls to fall. And what is hard, and anybody listening that's in ministry will probably identify with this, is I've seen so many losses. I've done so many funerals for cancer patients of hardcore, God-fearing people that fasted and prayed, and the families gathered and prayed. So in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking, you know, does God still heal? what does it take? You know, what am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? So I'm just going to do what I know to do. And I'm not bragging, but my wife and I and family were fasting and praying. And after Logan first got out of the hospital, we brought him before the church. And man alive, could I tell you about moves of God and the touches of God? And we walk on the stage and just hundreds of people. I wish I could show you the picture. Hundreds of people gathered around Logan. And we're not touchy-feely. I mean, I believe in fasting and praying, but I'm not going to declare his cancer to be gone. I mean, only God can declare his cancer to be gone. And so we go back into the hospital for round 2 of chemo. And when we go in, one of the nurses came in and she's like, hey, I'm going to redo his heart rate. Something's not right. And we're like, okay. And so I'm not thinking anything about it. She just had a misread. And then 3 nurses come in, and then they start calling for codes. And then they said, Logan, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? I'm like, what's going on? We're supposed to be looking for our breakthrough.
Yeah.
And they called for a crash cart. And they hooked Logan up to a crash cart. And they said, sir, something's happening to your son. His heart's in distress. And before long, they had the cardiac unit in there. They had the intensive care unit in there. They had the crash team in there. He's hooked up to a crash cart. And the stress on his heart was so extreme that he went into AFib. His heart rate was over 200.
Wow.
And they were throwing ice bags on him to try to do things to get an effect. And they said, we have got to get him down to the intensive care, the cardiac intensive care. And I'm walking and I'm thinking, we're just losing. We're not on a journey of faith. We're not on a journey of winning. I'm about to watch my son die. Right after we have these outpouring of prayers and people coming and people gathered around our house and all these different things that happen, he's just going to die. We went down there and they called in for a chaplain to come sit with me and Jenny. They filled the room and then they said the words clear and they said, he won't feel this. We put our twilight on him and his body jumped out of the bed about 2-3 feet. He jumped and screamed bloody murder and moaned. And I mean, literally, they electrified my son. And then they were like whispering. And I'm like, what are they whispering about? And they said it didn't work. And they did it again. And I'm telling you, you think, is your faith struggling? I was just mush. I had no faith. I had no feelings. I just felt like completely abandoned by God. I mean, completely abandoned by God. And here, his blood pressure, he was in there. His heart's still in AFib. His blood pressure dropped to 60/30. And then God brought in a Jewish doctor. She walked in the room. She looked at me and she said, she's the head honcho over Children's Hospital over this whole segment, this whole area. And she's explaining to me about how the heart works. And she said, sir, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I'm a pastor. And she stepped back and she goes, you're a pastor? She goes, why are you asking me these questions? She said, I didn't make your son, me. You both know that Jehovah made your son. Wow. She said, he made his heart. And she said, I said, I know that, but do you see what's going on? And she says, but can you see what's not going on? She said, do you realize that he's okay and God is working? And God brought me into this room, and God shows up in mysterious ways when you are just shaken to the core. She said, the whole team left, and she walked back into the room. She put her arm around me and she said, here's my cell phone. She said, I'd never do this. She said, I'd never, ever do it, but God told me to do it. She says, I'm walking this journey with you.
Wow.
And she said, during our appointments later, we found out that she was praying. She tells me, she said, I pray for Logan every single day.
That's amazing.
So I'm telling you, it's up and down, and faith is a struggle. It's not just a step forward and everything's going to be okay. And I think for the story of like Abraham and Isaac, I struggled with that because people would come to me and just say, are you putting your son on the altar? And I said, is the struggle between me and God, or is it between me and cancer? Am I giving, if I just give up? And you know what I'm saying? People say, fight the good fight of faith. Okay, fight. And then the next thing they're saying, let go. So I'm just being honest. I'm like, do we fight or do we let go?
Sure.
And I think a lot of us struggle with that. It's like, what do you do? And I think we just flip the coin of, wait on God and run the race. Am I waiting on God or am I running the race? And so I would say faith is a struggle. And anybody that just doesn't have the struggle doesn't understand that. I'm sure when God told Abraham to take his son, your only son, and lay him upon the altar, it's like that wasn't a mental struggle.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like faith is moving forward when nothing makes sense. That's what God gave me. Because when Abraham had to move forward, he had a 3-day journey, but he had to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I think even though he didn't feel like it, he still had to put one foot in front of the other. And that is get up, pray when you don't feel like it, walk when you don't feel like it, testify, do a podcast when you're scared to death, when you don't know the outcome. Because I can't, guys, at the end of this, I can't say, and God gave this huge victory and it just all worked out. I can't say that. But I know that God allowed Abraham's mind for the circumstances that not make sense, for him to take his only son and for circumstances before him that just didn't add up. And sometimes God tests our faith by saying, I want you to move forward, but the things that you're facing do not make sense. And, to fast forward a little bit, we got through that. He got on heart medicine. He was okay. And then we were going into his surgery, which was December 1st, 2021. And we had, I'm not just saying this, I literally mean this. We had tens of thousands of people praying, tens of thousands. I mean, our
definitely.
Facebook following, churches.
Yes.
And I was so confident. I walked up to the nurse that was going to be in his surgery, and I said, today you're going to see something amazing happen.
Wow.
Because I was just like, I was just so, I was scared, but I was just so excited to see what God was going to do. And I just wanted them to know what you're about to see is going to be God. I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I just was such in that zone of just watching God work that I even went out of my seat while I'm sitting there to minister to other people that I saw crying in the room. Because I'm thinking, this isn't about me. This is about God doing something. And then Jenny said, the surgeon just said that he needs to meet with us in the consultation room. And I'm like, okay, maybe it went so good that they're done in a third of the time. And then we're thinking, or maybe something happened because they're cutting on his heart. We went in there, the doctor walked through the door, and he said, I'm sorry. It's far worse than we ever thought.
Wow.
We could not take out his cancer. I think we were wrong about the diagnosis. We were wrong on the CTs. We were wrong on the MRI. Seeing it with our eyes, he said, I'm sorry. He said, I think it might be a muscle cancer. It might be growing out of his heart.
Oh my God.
There is no cure for what I saw, and there's nothing we can do. And he said, I brought in specialists and had him open all that time. And they closed him up, and we went to be with our family that was in the lobby. And then we got a phone call, and they said, your son's awake, and he's asking for you. And I said, but I thought we couldn't go see him because you can't get back there. They said, they're making an exception because nobody wants to tell your son that the surgery failed, but your son is asking. We went in that room, and he was tubes and wires, and he was bloated, and he's laying there. He couldn't move, and he just woke up, and he just was grunting the words, "Dad, did you get my cancer out?" Oh. And I was choking back the tears, and Jen and I were just like, "What do you say? What do you say?" And we had to tell him. And I said, "Logan, you were a champion, buddy." I said, "It's over. Now let's just get you through recovery." And he said, "Dad, did you get it out?" And I had to tell him, I said, "Buddy, no, you still have cancer." And yes, you're when you're thinking that you're about to watch a giant fall,
yeah,
and yet the giant literally like kicks your butt. Faith is a struggle. And so I'm thank God for all the things that he's done, but I will say that yes, we have struggled, but I tell you, anyways, we'll keep talking. That's not the end of the story.
Yeah. Well,
for sure.
It makes me think of what it says in Proverbs. It says a just man falls 7 times and gets up again. It does not say that a just man never falls.
Right.
That he never struggles. She never struggles. And I just want to say this to those who are listening. It's okay to fall. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to have bad days and hard times. But don't quit on your faith. Don't quit on God. Don't quit on the people that are surrounding you. So, thinking about, you shared some of your own personal struggles and issues, and obviously while you're going through this, your wife is going through this. And so, one of our jobs as a husband is to help provide emotionally for our spouses. So what are some things that you as a husband did to help Jenny through the whole situation?
I'll tell you, I feel like I should give you guys this really cool answer. And I feel like the answer truly is more about her helping me than me helping her, just to be honest. She has been an absolute rock. And I know she struggles, and we both struggles. And I think in marriage, when the Bible says, "And the two shall be one flesh," it's a matter of when one is strong, the other one is weak, and we're there for each other.
Most definitely.
And the one thing that we just made a pact, and we try to stick to this, is when we need to talk, we'll talk. And we're sensitive to when the other person is down. And I remember when we were talking to the surgeon, one of the times that we were talking to the surgeon, and he told us just how bad it was. But before then, we were at Children's Hospital, and they were just like, "You're going to win, and this is going to work." And when we talked to them, they were telling us that it's probably invaded, it's connected to things, this cancer doesn't just go away. And I remember coming home, and she just was laying on the bed, just weeping. And I had no words to say. What was I going to say? It's going to be okay. I mean, we both knew, and we just both laid there and held hands and cried, And I think when you don't have the words, sometimes just your presence is what we need. And just not being a false positive, but just being there for each other, I think is so important in trying to remind each other of the good, and reminding each other what God has done, and pulling each other back to that foundation of truth. And because that's why we're there. God created, it's not good for Adam to be alone. I will make him a helpmeet. I'm going to bring somebody into his life. And that goes both ways. And so we talk, we encourage, and we just have each other's backs.
Yeah, and I love that. You think about what it says in Ecclesiastes, 2 are better than 1, because if one falls, then you're by yourself. There's nobody to help you. And that's the great thing about marriage is, hey, one of us is struggling, we can help the other. Or, hey, both of us are struggling, but at least we're here to hobble along together. And I think sometimes you talked about being there, not even necessarily having the words. Sometimes our words can get us into trouble. So just being there for each other. So do you guys have like a set time just to get away and to in the midst of all the struggle that's still going on to just spend time and invest in each other? And if so, how do you do that?
So we try to do date nights, and it's funny because when we do date nights, it's hard to get together and talk and not talk about this stuff.
Sure.
Just because it's all around us and things like that. But on our date nights, we try to plan out vacation and plan out, what's coming up and making goals and things like that. And we try now, instead of not just zoning out when the kids are all distracted and our kids all have jobs and different things that they do, when we go sit on the couch, try not to turn on the couch and just zone out, but sit there and just check in with each other and talk. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's a struggle, because when you deal with it so much, it's easier just to zone out.
Sure.
Right.
And Jenny got on to me one time. We were in life group, and I just started sharing some of the things that God had taught me. And when we got home, she was just quiet. I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong? She goes, you haven't shared those things with me, but you shared them with the life group.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm sorry. You're right. And just because I think we try to protect each other's feelings by not talking.
Sure.
And in reality, what we do need is, when God's working, we need to be sharing those things.
That's good.
Yeah, I totally agree. And sometimes we think we're protecting our spouse or that loved one or that relationship by holding back.
Right.
But it really does do the opposite if we're not fully sharing and giving the information that person needs to know. So,
Yeah.
So why don't you fill us in? I know you've had a lot of ups and downs over this whole time, but can you just let us know what is the latest update on Logan's fight with cancer?
I can do that. Let me rewind a little bit just so that everybody has an idea. In 2021, we went like 4 or 5 months on the really hard chemo, being admitted. Surgery failed December 6th. We met with a specialist that December of 2021. He gave us a pill that he said could stunt the growth of the cancer to buy us time. At that point, it was just buying time. It was no longer saving his life. But just, we're going to try to get as much time as possible. That chemo pill, or whatever the pill was an experimental thing, and it worked better. It was in the top 3% of success rates of the pill, and it actually shrunk the cancer.
Wow.
And over the next 8 months, we saw the cancer shrink and him actually improve on a pill that wasn't supposed to do that.
Wow.
And then August 1st of 2022, the pill stopped working, and we found out that all the progress that we made over those 8 months all grew back within those 2-3 months.
Oh, no.
So it was a setback. So they put him on the chemo that he is now, which is an outpatient chemo. So for the last 6-7 months, he's been on this new chemo, and it has shrunk it little bits at a time. And so that's where we're at as of, right now. So we've seen God work through that. So now the cancer, he has none of those side effects. He's not in AFib. He doesn't have the high heart rate. He is not on any heart meds whatsoever right now. He is able to be active when he feels good, because of the chemo medicine knocks him down and knocks his numbers down and stuff right now. So the cancer has shrunk a total of over 70% over the last year and a half.
Okay.
And so now we're just trying to get it to shrink to the point where it will let go. So everybody listening right now, here's our big prayer. It's got to pull away from the arteries. So it's shrinking, but it's got to pull away from the arteries, because when they go in to cut it out, if they go in again, they can't cut his arteries. It's just, it's not an area that they can cut the cancer away from. So that's what we're praying for right now. So that the treatment that he's on is just praying and asking God to pull it away from the arteries. So we have hope right now, but it is a Hail Mary. What has to happen doesn't normally happen. So it's got to all be God.
Okay.
And then surgery might be an option, again, possibly.
So in having the conversation and thinking about, just who we are as parents, your son gets to a point where, hey, he's graduated high school. You have these hopes, these plans, these dreams for college, for a career, for marriage, for grandchildren. And that totally changes on a dime. How do you, as a dad and as a couple, grieve, the loss of those dreams that you had?
Yeah. We're sitting in the hospital, and the day before, I was trying to figure out where I was getting his cake for his graduation party. And now I'm trying to figure out if he is going to live to see a graduation party.
Yeah.
And that is such a change. And to say we weren't grieving or whatever was hard, but I tell you, it's the only way to get through that is hope. And I tell you guys, pastor to pastor, dad to dad, parent to parent, we can talk a big game and preach the idea of who God is.
Oh yeah.
But I'll tell you, it is faith. And faith is not a feeling, and it's not just knowledge. Faith is Hebrews 11, where a bunch of people went through a lot of stuff we would never want to go through. And that's where God says, hey, maybe I'm going to do something. And guys, God is doing something. And so the ability to move forward is just the idea of how are we going to view this? Is we're the victims and God just doesn't like us and God's picking on us? Or God gave me a warrior of a son that is absolutely gone through stuff that I could not. And he will encourage us and get up and go in and pump his body full of chemo and come home and work. And he's saving for college in the midst of him being sick. And he will shop for clothes for college. And I'm like, he said to me one time, I said to him, I said, Logan, I said, hey, maybe the cancer's half the size in the next scan. He looked at me and he said, Dad, or maybe it's gone. I'm like, yes.
Man,
I'm
what
like,
faith.
what in the world? And he's just 18, 19 years old. But I tell you, he's encouraged me. But I tell you, faith is for us as pastors, leaders, parents. Just know that faith doesn't mean that nothing's bad's going to happen. It just means that God is the God of the story. And that I believe that God is working even right now of you guys asking me to be on this podcast, because I think this is all for the glory of God. And I think our generation needs to get back to the idea that we serve a God that hears and answers prayers, but it's not going to be from an emotional song that you hear on the radio and you shed a tear, raise your hand. God's saying, I'm looking to change your life, not just change your circumstance. I want to change you. And that doesn't happen in just the snap of the fingers and everything goes away, because then we would be wrapped up in that experience of we brought him before the church and Logan was healed. Everybody would be running to the front of the church and wanting people around them when we should be running to God and needing the presence of God around us.
Good. That's right.
So this is more about a journey. And can I remind you guys, I mentioned Daniel in the lion's den. Can I remind you that Daniel prayed 3 times a day before he got to that point?
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes we're all about God rescued Daniel from the lion's den, but we forget about God changed Daniel through his journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the touch of God was Jehovah Jireh on the top of the mountain, and God saved Isaac from being sacrificed. What about the 3 days of the journey of taking a foot in front of one step in front of the other, of God working in his heart and the struggle of some days that he probably just stopped and looked up and said, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where are you? Do you still love me? I thought you had a plan for me, and all of it's falling apart. It's faith.
Yes.
God is looking for a generation that's going to live out faith, because without faith, it's impossible to please him. For he that comes to God must believe that he is, and he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him.
Right, yep.
And God wants us to seek him.
Yes.
And so I think God's using Logan right now to work in my life and everybody else's life, to know that it's time not just to walk this Christian, comfortable life, that God wants people to seek him.
Wow. Good.
And that's so powerful. What a great lesson. And I'm thinking about other parents out there who's struggling with a kid with cancer, or maybe your parents have cancer, or friends, somebody that you love. What's something as you're kind of wading through this, and you spent the last year battling and fighting and struggling and getting up.
Yeah.
What's something you would say to them to try to help them in the journey that they're in right now?
The advice that I would give now, compared to just being a pastor standing in somebody's hospital room when they're diagnosed, is totally different. I would tell you, for whoever you are that's listening right now, your story is your story.
Yep.
And I say that because what happens is it's easy to hear what somebody else is going through and just saying, or you see an article on Facebook or whatever of somebody dying or whatever, and then you just think, well, that's going to be me, that's going to be my kids next or whatever. But every person in the Bible had their own story.
Yep.
And don't let Satan flood your mind with negative thoughts because of what happened to somebody else. God put you on a path, and God's doing something in your story. And I'll also tell you that God's mercy is new every day. When you get to the point where you think, I cannot do this, and I've had nights where I just literally did not sleep, and I woke up in a panic, and I've heard Logan coughing in the other room, and I just could not. I could not. Oh man, I was just consumed. And then you get up, and you get into Word, and God literally sits and He speaks to you, and you pray, and God literally puts His hands on your shoulder, or it feels like He is, and you get up and you go again. So just keep moving forward. When you don't feel like it, pray. When you don't feel like it, worship. Because His mercy is new every day. And God works in mysterious ways, His wonders to perform. And guys,
yep.
I wish we had the time, but I could tell you 25 stories of God showing up in our journey in ways that we never thought. And God just shows Himself to us when I'm at my ultimate breaking point, that God will do the most amazing things to say, I am with you. I am for you. I am greater, and I do the impossible.
Amen. Wow.
So don't quit. Just don't quit. And one more thing. Surround yourself with people. Build a team. My life group, my staff here at the church, my church family, my family, Jenny's family. We're surrounded by people that are cheering us on and have our backs. Don't go through this alone.
Totally agree.
That's excellent advice for all of us.
Yeah.
We just cannot thank you enough, Tony, for joining us today and just being so open and honest with what's happening in your life and what God's doing. You were very real with us, and we appreciate that. And I know that what you've talked about today is going to help a lot of other people. And I know it's helped me personally. I have a lot of things kind of going through my mind right now that I'm processing, and just some areas where I need to increase my faith and maybe start to look at things a little differently than I have in the past. And so we really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. And we will continue to pray for Logan faithfully. And I know our listeners will pray for Logan as well.
So we have a Pray for Logan page. And it's on Facebook and Instagram, and it is Pray for Logan without any spaces. And the picture is a picture. It just says Pray for Logan in the profile picture, and then it's a picture of our family is at the top of it. And so our theme verse through this has been, now unto Him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think.
Amen.
We're asking God to join us in prayer, to ask God to do the unexpected.
Yes.
And so Thank you for praying. Thank you for letting me come on here and share our story, and just to have other people join us in prayer.
Definitely our honor, and we do want to put this out there for all of our listeners to be praying for Logan.
Yes.
to connect. We're going to put a link in the show notes right directly to that Facebook page so that you can be connected. You can continue to follow the story. You can pray with knowledge. And if nothing else, just go on and just say, hey, Tony, heard the podcast. I'm praying. Just something simple like that, just to let this family know you're not alone. And he talked about having that team around you. I want you, as our listeners, to join the team.
Yes.
To surround this family with love and hope and encouragement, because God is doing something. He's working mightily, and we are praying for Jesus to be glorified in all this in greater ways than he ever could before. And we end every single episode with a family meeting idea. And here's what I want you to do tonight for your family meeting is to sit down and just talk about who do you know in your life that's fighting a difficult battle right now. And it may be cancer or some other health thing, but maybe that's not it. Maybe somebody you know is walking through a divorce or some other relationship crisis. Maybe you know somebody that's struggling financially. They're just having a hard time. And our society and our culture is in such a financial turmoil right now with everything that's happening. But who do you know that's fighting a battle? And I want you to decide right now that you're going to join their team and talk about ways that you can be an encouragement to them, how you can help them. And as Tony talked about, maybe it's just sitting beside them and not really saying anything, but just being and having a presence in their life. So make those discussions and decisions and step forward and be a part of their support team this week.
Thanks so much for joining us, friends. We appreciate you. Please go and subscribe to the Family Meeting Podcast from your favorite podcast provider. And if you found this information to be helpful, please share this episode on social media and invite your friends and family to listen in with you.
To find more content and information Lysandra and I provide, you can go to our website, familymeeting.org, or shoot us an email at info@familymeeting.org. If you'd like to tell us your story, shoot us a text or a call and send us a message at 904-257-3062.
And we want to invite you to join us for our next family meeting. Next week, we're going to talk about the difference between helping and enabling. When do you as a parent need to apply that tough love? And that's a really difficult discussion. We've had many people counseling in counseling situations where we try to help them through this. And we're just going to talk about the difference between helping and enabling next week. So join us.
Sometimes the hardest thing you can do is to let your child feel the weight of their choices. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely easier said than done. So I think that'll be an interesting and a helpful conversation next week. Thanks for joining us today for this family meeting. Have a great week, everybody. This meeting is adjourned. All right, Tony, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We appreciate you being on with us. Man, you have really been an encouragement to me. I just am so grateful to you.
Oh, thank you. I hope I didn't load up the podcast with the negative, because I could have gone 45 minutes easy of just talking about the positives.
Sure.
But I feel like the direction that God was kind of leading was more about what God has done through the heart, not just the circumstances, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
So for our podcast, those who are watching on YouTube right now, you talked about the God thing showing up. Can you just share one of those right now with those who may be watching this on YouTube?
I'd love to do that. So, man, there's so many, but one of my favorites, I'll tell you, I was in one of those lows, and I was really discouraged. And somebody sent me a book, and I think I told you guys this story, but it's one of my favorite stories. And the book was called "Does God Still Heal?" And I thought it was going to be one of those touchy-feely, I just want hard facts of this is true and not just some emotional experience in a book. And then I sat down and I Googled Logan's pathology report because I wanted to know what the terms meant.
Yeah.
And every one of them was death, 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 incurable, incurable, incurable.
Wow.
And I was like, why did I do this? Why did I do this? I
Yeah,
thought it would
seriously.
help me to have understanding. So I was really discouraged. So I went up to my bedroom. There was that book. And I thought, what do I have to lose? I need something good. So I sat down with the book and I just started reading, and I couldn't quit. And I was obsessed. And it was just like, it was done in such a way that it was done like questions. Like, does God do this? Or does God hear this way? Or does God still work in this way? And I'm like, and it was all biblically based, and I was just soaking this up. And then, of course, I have an addiction, so I had to feed that. So I drove to Starbucks.
Nice.
And I'm sitting in the parking lot reading, and I mobile ordered my Starbucks so that I could just go in and grab it, come back out, and then keep reading. And so I did, and I walked in, and I go up to the counter to grab my Starbucks that had my name on it. It's already ready. And I turn around, and there's a guy standing in front of me with a cell phone in my face. And he said, "Sir, I don't mean to startle you, but I'm on Facebook Live right now. And can I talk to you?" And I'm like, okay. Well, the reason why he was watching me is because I was sitting in my car and he was sitting outside on his computer. So I sat down the book and I just bowed my head and prayed. And I said, "God, I don't want to just read a book like this. I want to experience you." And I think that's seeking the face of God is not just praying. It's a matter of, I want to see your presence.
Yeah.
And God's really taught me a lot through that about, I want to see you in my circumstance, see the face of God, seek his face. So I prayed that. I said, "God, I just want to see you work." So when he turned around, and I put the book down, went inside. And so he turned around and he said, "All right, sorry to startle you, but you're wearing a shirt that says faith over fear, pray for Logan." And I wore those shirts everywhere. I was like a billboard for recruiting people to pray. And so he said, "I'm a Christian," and I was on the porch. And he said, "I saw you get out of your car, and God just told me to go talk to you." And he said, "Tell me your story." And I said, "My son has cancer." And I said, only God can heal him." And he turned around and he said, "Hey, did you hear that?" He said, "His son has cancer, and we're going to all pray for him together."
Wow.
And then he turned the camera back around and he said, "I'm sorry, but God told me to go talk to you, so I had to go talk to you."
That's incredible.
And I walked out to my car with my coffee, just like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I'm not one of these, like, I was driving down the road and saw a cloud and God, whatever. I'm not that type of person. So, but this was one of those, I literally prayed, sat down the book, walked in, a guy walked up and he said, "God just told me to come up to you and tell you that God's working." Mm-hmm. I mean, just like, I know he wasn't an angel because I found him on Facebook, and I don't think angels have Facebook. So
Who knows
he was
now,
a real
right?
person. Yeah. He was a real person that God just used to touch that. So, but God's done that over and over and over again. So God is definitely working.
That's so
awesome.
cool. It is incredible to hear how God has been working. And the truth is, as far as like how much negative to share and how much positive to share, only God
Right.
can lead you in that.
Right.
But we need to hear the negative too, because
Sure.
our lives are not mountaintop after mountaintop after
No.
mountaintop. Our
No.
lives are largely walked in a valley.
Yes.
And so it's good to hear that truth about
Yeah.
what, those terrible times when it didn't go the way you prayed and God didn't answer yes, because that happens to all of us. And we need
Right.
we need to understand that. And okay, now what's the next step? Do I give up on God? Do I
Right.
stop praying because he didn't answer? Not the way I wanted. And so I think that was great. And I appreciate you sharing the negative. I appreciate you sharing the positive, because we need to hear both ends of that.
If we don't share both ends, when you read those books or you hear the podcast, then it's just like you feel isolated, like God worked in their circumstance and
That's right.
God's ignoring me. But the truth of the matter is, it's the same thing. They're just not telling the whole story because we feel like we have to make God look good.
Yep.
We don't have to make God look good.
Isn't that
just,
something?
Just tell the truth.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
God's story.
So
Just
good.
tell his story.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Tony, thanks for jumping on our YouTube channel today. We sure appreciate you
Appreciate the opportunity.
sharing that with us. We're going to say goodbye to all our YouTubers now. So have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.